In this set of lecture videos, we're going to be talking about the Constitution. When the set of lectures are over, you'll be able to describe the distribution of power in three types of political systems: the unitary system, a federalist system, and a confederation. You'll be able to describe the primary functions of all three branches of government: the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, and who holds those offices at the national level, the state level, and the local level. For some of you, this might be very rudimentary, but it's really important that everybody be on board and everybody be working with the same background information. You'll also be able to explain the significance of the difference between divine rights and natural rights, something that was really important in the Declaration of Independence, as well as the principles enshrined in the Constitution. You'll be able to explain why the Virginia Plan, which was one of the plans proposed at the Constitutional Convention, favored the more populous states. You'll be able to explain why the New Jersey Plan favored the less populous states. And most importantly, bringing those two things together, you'll be able to explain why the structure of Congress was, as it's called, a great compromise. You'll also be able to describe how members of the House of Representatives and Senate were elected when the Constitution was originally adopted. And you'll also be able to explain when the way in which people are elected has changed over time. You'll be able to explain how many electoral votes each state gets and how the Electoral College works in general. You'll be able to explain the impeachment process, that is the process by which you can remove a president from office. You'll be able to explain the meaning of the 3/5 compromise and its significance, and also you'll be able to explain the way in which people frequently misinterpret the meaning of the 3/5 compromise. So with that in mind, that's where we're headed, and I want to get started. I'm going to move myself out of the way here. When the United States, or when the colonies, declared independence from the British government, the task they were faced with was coming up with a new government. They'd been ruled by the British, and now it was time to come up with a system of their own. And in coming up with a new government and a new governmental system, the fundamental question that the framers were facing was this: who gets the power to make decisions? How are they going to set it up? And essentially the choices available to the framers, both of the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution, was power could either be vested in, given to the national government, or it could be given to state governments. And generally speaking, there were three options that they had before them. They could come up with a unitary system, or they could come up with a federalist system, or they could come up with a confederation. Okay, and I want to talk a little bit about what each of these mean. Now, if you can see, after unitary system, I have n is greater than s. The federalist system, I have n is greater than or equal to s. And confederation, I have n is less than s. If you get a question on the exam asking you to explain the difference between these types of systems, don't use those shortcuts. You need to explain in words the difference between them. So if I were to ask that question and someone would say a unitary system is n is greater than s, and so on, they would get a really bad grade. So again, it's important for you to take notes and make sure that you can explain in words and in complete sentences what each of these mean. So let's start with a unitary system. What do I mean by n is greater than s? What I'm trying to indicate here is that in a unitary system, the national government would possess almost all of the power. That the representatives in the national government would be the ones who had the power to make decisions, and the states in a unitary system would basically have to follow what the national government did. And by the way, you're going to hear me say national government or federal government. Those basically mean the same thing. but I'll try and stick with national government for the purposes of clarity. I'm going to skip down to confederation first. In a confederation, the situation is reversed. In a confederation, state governments have all the power and national government is relatively weak, right? So it's the opposite of what a unitary system is. So individual states would make decisions on their own and basically function independently of one another, and the national government would have very limited power in a confederation. And then in between those two is the federalist system. That's where I have n is greater than s, greater than or equal to s. In a federalist system, the national government has more power than state governments, but it's not like a unitary system, because implied in that way that I've written it is that in some cases it's n equals s, that the national government and the state governments are equal in terms of how much power they have. That's one of the things that makes a federalist system complicated, and as we go through the course of the semester, one of the things you're going to find is it makes American government complicated as well. So a unitary system where the national government has all the power, a confederate system where the state governments have the power, and then a federalist system where the national government does have more power than the states, but they share power as well. Well, when the United States, when the colonies broke away from the British and declared their independence, they had the option of all three of these types of systems. Why did they choose in the original version of the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, why did the framers choose to go with a confederation? Well, the unitary system is what they just got out of, where the British government was telling the colonies what to do, and they didn't really listen to what the colonies were saying. They were just imposing their views on the and policies on the colonies. You've probably studied about the Stamp Act, things like that, where rules were and laws were imposed on the colonies in a unitary type system. So when the colonies broke away from the British government and the United States was established, the first Constitution of the United States was called the Articles of Confederation. They set up a confederation. And why? Well, if you come out of a system like a unitary system where the national government has all the power and the state governments have limited power, in this case it's the British government and the colonies, the natural thing to do is try the opposite of that. We just fought a war to get out of a unitary system. Let's set up a confederation. But as you'll see, the confederation that was created under the Articles of Confederation had a lot of problems. And so ultimately, it took, I think, like 11 years living under the Articles of Confederation, the first Constitution of the United States, where the framers realized this isn't working. And so they got rid of the Confederation idea and they said, let's set up this federalist system. So that's how we wound up with a federalist system, which is what we have now. The Constitution of the United States created a federalist system of government, and that's what we live under right now. Now, in the next video, I'm going to talk about some really basic things about different branches of government and what their functions are, and then who are the executives, the legislature, and the courts, the judicial branch at the national, state, and local level. For some of you, this is going to be very rudimentary, probably things that you already know and you've learned back in high school. But for some people, this is brand new. And it's really important for people to that everybody be on the same playing field and have the same level of understanding. So in the next video, if you realize, oh, I know this stuff already, maybe just speed up the video and go through it quickly. And if it's brand new to you, don't feel bad, right? Because that's what you're here for. You're here to learn this stuff. So that's what we'll be talking about in the next set of videos. The different branches of government as well as how those branches, who represents each of those branches at the national, the state, and the local level.